The United States wrestles with a partial government shutdown, this time over President Trump's immigration policies. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. The United States government partially shut down over the weekend over deep partisan differences on funding President Trump's immigration crackdown. The Senate on Friday passed legislation to fund much of the government and keep the Department of Homeland Security running for 2 weeks. Negotiations continued over Democrat demands for new limits on federal immigration agents. CGTN's Jim Spellman has more in this report.
The partial U.S. government shutdown continues, with the Departments of Defense, Health and Human Services, and State all affected, though with little impact on the public so far. Last week, U.S. President Donald Trump and Senate Democrats struck a deal, agreeing to fund most of the government except the Department of Homeland Security. The Senate overwhelmingly voted to extend funding for DHS, which includes ICE, for 2 weeks to allow negotiations over changes to immigration enforcement policies following the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. But Republicans in the House of Representatives now need to pass the legislation, with Democrats saying they won't help fast-track the package.
Well, let's say I'm confident that we'll do it at least by Tuesday. We have a logistical challenge of getting everyone in town, and because of the conversation I had with Hakeem Jeffries, I know that we've got to pass a rule and probably do this mostly on our own. I think that's very unfortunate.
With a razor-thin majority in the House, there is no guarantee House Republicans can pass the measure. And even if it does pass and the partial shutdown ends, negotiating changes to immigration enforcement policies won't be easy. Democrats want strict limits on agents from ICE and other federal agencies.
Body cameras should be mandatory. Masks should come off. Judicial warrants should absolutely be required, consistent with the Constitution in our view, before DHS agents or ICE agents are breaking into the homes of the American people or ripping people out of their cars.
Amid backlash over the events in Minneapolis, President Trump and some Republican lawmakers have expressed willingness to change immigration enforcement policies, but it's not clear how far they will go or what reforms will be acceptable to Democrats.
Both sides are dug in. There are Republicans who will not vote for any type of reform. There are Democrats who will not vote for any type of funding for ICE.
So even if the U.S. government reopens Tuesday, there could be another more limited shutdown fight in 2 weeks. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
There is much to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Rina Shah is a political strategist and commentator. Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch is an immigration attorney. Also with us is Jaden Horan. He's a political analyst. And Frank Sesno served as CNN's Washington bureau chief. He's currently a professor at George Washington University School of Media and Public Affairs. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Frank Sesno, let's look at the state of play right now. Democrats in both the House as well as the United States Senate want new rules that will restrain federal immigration agents. There seems to be a much stronger push in the House than in the Senate among Democrats, but party leaders are being called upon to hold the line when it comes to providing more money for ICE. Republicans, for their part, they're fighting over what is acceptable, and as we heard Senator Kennedy say there are Republicans who say no deal. They will not compromise on this at all. And President Trump, for his part, says no changes. He sent this out on his social media platform, Truth Social. He said no changes, all in caps, pass the bill. So how do you see this play out?
Well, I see this playing out in a really tough way because the Republicans and President Trump have very little running room here. This is very different than the last shutdown, when really the Democrats were on the defensive. This time, the White House is on the defensive, and Republicans, as you heard Speaker Johnson intimate there, have very little leverage. The public opinion pictures that you're showing from the streets has turned markedly against the administration on immigration enforcement. 6 in 10 Americans think immigration measures like the ones you're seeing here have gone too far. The Republican support for the president on immigration, one of his strongest suits, in an AP poll, dipped by about 12 points, I think it was. Still strong wrong, but that's a significant erosion from the 86 percentage points that he had before. So going into this, we're partially closed now. It's more chaos. There's less political running room. Democrats know they have more leverage because they are operating from a greater position of strength, riding this wave of discontent, not just over immigration, by the way, but also over economic issues generally. So President Trump finds himself in an unusual position now, being more on the defensive than he's been in previous times.
Jaden Horan, as Frank points out, public pressure is mounting. We see tens of thousands of people take to the streets. We saw them over the weekend in all those demonstrations. Democrats want ICE to, the rules to change. They want ICE to take the masks off, wear body cameras. I think that's already been conceded by the Department of Homeland Security. These agents will have body cameras in future. And Democrats also want to stop these roving patrols that we see in many cities around the country. Where do you see this heading?
Yeah, this is really interesting. What we see is the left flexing its muscle in terms of mass mobilization of protesters, but it doesn't change the underlying fact that the American people, whether it's a Harvard poll or the Civil poll, both show that 6 out of 10 Americans support deportation for criminal illegals. 67% believe that state and local law enforcement should work with the administration. So I think we're dealing with two competing narratives here, and it is interesting, as Frank said, that the administration is on the defensive, but what we're seeing for the first time is President Trump kind of conceding a point in redirecting by removing Bovino, by replacing him with Tom Homan, and kind of changing the narrative around this and working with administration officials in Minnesota, with the governor and obviously Mayor Fry. We're sort of seeing President Trump try to neutralize that argument, even as the left mobilizes against it. And what's really interesting here is we now have the mayor of New York City and obviously the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, and Mandami coming out and saying they're going to suspend that very enforcement that Americans say that should happen, all on the heels of the federal overreach in Minnesota. And yet, as the administration is course correcting and seeking to change the narrative and remove this as a political football, Democrats are attempting to seize on it. And I think while the administration was playing defense, now we're getting back into the realm where Democrats are responding a little bit and a little late to something as the news cycle moves on and we have things that continue to spin, like the Epstein files or the economy. So for what I will say, the analysis of this is that Democrats seem a little behind. They have some leverage, but they're a little behind. And with Trump doing what he has not done before, which is course correct, I think they're going to be knocked off their foot once again.
Kate, we see this big debate going on about what ICE can do over what they should be allowed to do, and it's all, of course, tied to money for the government to run. But what does it actually mean for people on the ground, people who are being affected by this? Does it change anything for them?
Yeah, I think that, Jaden calls out the statistic telling us that 6 in 10 Americans are for the deportation of people who have committed crimes. And I think it's important to keep in mind that's a bit of a misleading statistic, because what we're talking about here with these roving patrols and these masked agents and tear gas in the street and the murder of Renee Good and the murder of Alex Preddy is that we are not seeing ICE and CBP go after people who have a criminal background. The vast majority of the people who are being targeted have no criminal background. So what the Democrats are asking for is that ICE utilize judicial warrants and due process. I mean, even just 2 days ago, the ICE director, Todd Lyons, sent a memo to his agents telling them that not only do they not need judicial warrants, they don't need administrative warrants. They can make warrantless arrests against people out on the street. That is unacceptable, and the Democrats absolutely need to be responding. We also need to see the masks come off of these agents so that they can't just be out there on the street acting with carte blanche when they bring this level of violence against the people. We cannot see this use of excessive force, these roving patrols. We need to see cooperation with local law enforcement, local and state law enforcement, rather than these agencies just coming in and disregarding what the law enforcement of the locality says. And so this is really, really critical. I mean, we're looking at video from Portland, Oregon today where they're shooting tear gas against peaceful protesters, and I disagree. I don't think that the moment has passed. I think that the American public is absolutely paying attention. We are infuriated. We are responding, and absolutely the Democrats need to keep pushing and requiring these basic fundamental rights be asserted within the Department of Homeland Security. They are not asking for that much here.
Right, Kate, as far as the legal pushback is concerned, Minnesota, the state, has gone to court to stop what it calls a massive unconstitutional surge of agents in two cities. That's Minneapolis and St. Paul. They're known in the United States as twin cities. Over the weekend, a judge denied that request to halt the surge, and Trump's lawyers, in fact, lawyers representing ICE, say that this lawsuit is frivolous. Do you believe this case has legal merit?
I do. I think that we'll see an appeal of this, and I hope that we see something applicable nationwide, some type of class action suit or application, because what we have seen is a lot of individual responses in cases, and we need something to apply across the board. Of course, the first backstop is Congress with funding and what we're seeing in the government shutdown. Then we have the courts to turn to. So I do hope that we see the courts step in on a nationwide basis, but right now I'm looking at what Congress is doing, and I'm urging people to keep calling your legislators, especially your Republican legislators, and let them know how you feel, because it's the flooding of phone calls that they're getting. These tally counts matter. If you text them or you leave a message, it makes a difference, and we need to keep pushing.
Rina Shah, one of President Trump's chief officials, immigration officials, also known as the border czar, Tom Homan, was sent to Minneapolis, as Jaden pointed out, in the aftermath of the killing of Alex Pretty and Renee Good. The commander who was there at the time, Greg Bovino, he was withdrawn. Homan has pledged to reduce the number of agents that are on the streets in Minneapolis, but his boss, President Trump, said no, there will be no pullback. So has there been any meaningful change in the kinds of tactics that ICE is using?
Well, I think right now we are looking at a situation in which Republicans are facing a choice, either double down or recalibrate. And Trump seems to be choosing recalibration. He says he wants to turn down the volume, so to speak, but he sent Tom Homan to Minnesota to de-escalate while he's also negotiating with Democrats. So we see this thing happening, but we also see the problem here. And the problem is that when you've activated your base around aggressive enforcement, if you pull back too much, they feel betrayed. If you don't pull back at all, then you're handing Democrats a gift for the midterms. So I think the internal blame game here is actually quite interesting. DHS head Kristi Noem has reportedly told associates that everything she's done was directed by Trump and Stephen Miller. That's Washington speak for I'm not going down alone. And over 140 House Democrats have co-sponsored impeachment articles against her, against Kristi Noem. And even some Republican senators like Tom Tillis are calling for her resignation. She met with Trump for some 2 hours without Miller present to plead her case. But Miller is the real architect here, and he's the one who pushed for the quote-unquote massacre narrative about Alex Pretty. But it wasn't Miller who was Senate confirmed. It was Kristi Noem who was. So Miller is harder to hold accountable, and that's the frustration you're hearing from Democrats today.
Rina, you say that Trump can't go too far because his base will feel betrayed. But looking more broadly at what Americans think of this, public opinion is against him, isn't it?
Sure. I mean, we have to look at what went wrong. Americans wanted border security, but what we're seeing is masked federal agents in tactical gear breaking into homes and 2 white U.S. citizens shot dead during protests in Minneapolis. I mean, that's not what swing voters signed up for. So I think the administration misread the mandate here. There's a difference between deporting criminals and creating this militarized enforcement atmosphere, because voters make distinctions. They support deporting people who commit crimes after entering illegally, but they're much more skeptical of broader sweeps. And I will say, the Minneapolis shootings were a turning point when an ICU nurse at a veterans hospital who was legally carrying a handgun gets tackled and shot to death by federal agents while attending to a woman that those agents knocked down. And then your DHS secretary calls him a domestic terrorist. You've lost the narrative completely.
Okay, let's leave immigration issues for the time being. We'll come back to it later. But for now, let's turn to the Epstein files. The fallout from the latest and potentially last set of Epstein files is being felt in multiple countries with resignations, apologies, and calls to testify. Last week's U.S. Justice Department release of more than 3 million files has led to days of revelations and never-before-seen footage. Nick Harper brings us the latest in this report.
I don't know. Why would you say that?
Jeffrey Epstein, in his own words.
What are you, class 3 sexual predator?
Tier 1.
Was tier 1's the highest and worst?
No, I'm
the lowest?
I'm the lowest.
You're the lowest. Okay, tier 1, you're the lowest.
Friday's Department of Justice document dump included more than 3 million files, 180,000 images, and some 2,000 videos, including this one, a 2-hour-long interview between Epstein and former Trump chief strategist Steve Bannon.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
No, but I do have a good mirror.
Is your money dirty money?
No, it's not. So, in fact...
Why is it not dirty money?
Because I earned it.
U.S. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche detailed the latest findings, but said this will be the final planned document release.
Today's release marks the end of a very comprehensive document identification and review process to ensure transparency to the American people and compliance with the Act.
Blanche says the new details won't lead to further criminal prosecution, but some are certainly facing scrutiny, like Peter Mandelson. His ties to Epstein forced him to resign as Britain's ambassador to the US. Now he's quit the Labour Party over the revelation Epstein paid him $75,000 2 decades ago. Allegations, Mandelson says, are false. Former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is pictured kneeling over a woman. He's denied any involvement in Epstein's activities, but the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Andrew should testify before the US Congress. The latest files have also led to Slovakia's national security advisor, Miroslav Lajcek's resignation, and for Norway's crown princess to apologise for poor judgment over her years-long contact with Epstein. The files even got a mention at Sunday's Grammy Awards.
That is a Grammy that every artist wants, almost as much as Trump wants Greenland. Which makes sense, I mean, because Epstein's island is gone, he needs a new one to hang out with Bill Clinton, so... Oh, I told you it's my last year. What are you going to do about it?
President Donald Trump has decided to do something about it, threatening to sue Trevor Noah over the joke for plenty of money. With millions of documents still being pored over, there may be more revelations and resignations to come. Nick Harper, CGTN, Washington.
Well, as we heard there, the impact is being felt by personalities around the world. Frank says no. Initially President Trump said there were 6 million documents. Now we've just seen this document dump of 3 million documents. Democrats are calling it a cover-up, but President Trump says the release absolves him of any wrongdoing. His name does appear more than 1,000 times in the documents. But, is this over now, as the Deputy Attorney General said it was?
No. What I think we're seeing is that there is no nuance in this case, right? If you were corresponding with Jeffrey Epstein, especially if you were corresponding, as a lot of people say, well, all I did they were just emails after he was a designated sex offender, you're in very dangerous territory. if you were in his island, in his plane, hanging out. It doesn't matter. And the American public is not drawing distinctions here. He is such an odious, was such an odious man doing such horrific things. I think one of the most powerful interviews I've seen in recent weeks was with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was one of Donald Trump's chief cheerleaders in the House of Representatives. She was MAGA all the way, and she's broken with him. And the key to that break, as she says, is Trump's posture towards the women who were victimized, or certainly one of the keys, to the women who were victimized. He wouldn't meet with them. And she thought that was outrageous. No nuance there. And so I think that this is far from over. And it's going to be one, whether the Democrats use it well or not, whether the Republicans like it well or not, they're going to continue to use this as a weapon aimed right square at pretty much anybody in power who had anything in any way to do with Jeffrey Epstein.
Jayden Horan, it wasn't just Democrats who were clamoring for the release of these files. It was also Republicans. And we should say that, you know, these files were released, 3 million of them, 3 million documents, I should say. But there were something like 10,000 redactions in those documents. In fact, one member of Congress said, quoting him here, he said, "We're getting dribs and drabs of information, the stuff they want us to see." I mean, can you understand the frustration here, Jayden? And is this, in your view, also a cover-up?
Absolutely, I understand the frustration. The frustration of the American people, knowing that the former Biden administration and then the Trump administration stonewalled or slow-walked the release of these documents. Really, you know, it kind of begs the question of where is our intelligence agencies, whether here in the United States or in the UK or Slovakia or our European allies, that this individual, much like Harvey Weinstein or Roger Ailes or Sean Diddy Combs, is able to essentially have compromise on very powerful individuals, especially people in government, and possibly illegally get favors or coerce them into actions, and the public is unaware. And what is most alarming, I think, for most Americans is, the Deputy AG Todd Blanche saying that there would be no additional charges coming. I mean, I don't know how you can look at these 3 million documents and see already that apparently, even though they broke the letter of the law by delaying it 30 days, they still didn't correctly redact all the victims within it. And obviously there are victims, so why aren't there charges coming? That is what I think the American people want to know. And Republicans and Democrats ought to be critical of the administration on this. I wouldn't say it's a cover-up, because it appears that people in power don't either want to be caught or they don't think it's important for the voters to know. It's less a cover-up and more just an abuse of power by administrations both left and right, and obviously not just in the United States, but at least in the Western world.
Rena, as much as President Trump wants to get past this, he wants to leave it behind him and distract us with other things from focusing on these documents, they are still making headlines every day. What did you make of this latest release?
Yeah, this is a credibility crisis for Trump's Department of Justice. I mean, he campaigned on draining the swamp and transparency about Epstein connections, and now his DOJ appears to be both incompetent in protecting victims and potentially selective in what they're releasing. And it was Deputy AG Todd Blanche who claimed that only 0.001% of documents had errors. But that doesn't matter when you're traumatizing dozens of sexual abuse survivors and putting them at physical risk. I mean, already we've heard multiple Jane Doe victims are receiving death threats and media harassment. One victim said the release puts her and her child at potential physical risk. And also there were nearly 40 nude photos of women, possibly underage. Those were left unredacted, while an innocuous photo of Trump was redacted. So I think the fact that hundreds of FBI personnel were instructed to flag any records mentioning Trump's name here, that also raises obvious questions about political interference, even if the DOJ denies it. This is a huge issue because Trump's Epstein problem has now resurfaced. There seems to be a selective transparency problem, and other high-profile names are creating pressure. For Republicans, this is a no-win situation. If you defend the DOJ's handling, you're defending the re-victimization of sexual abuse survivors. If you criticize it, you're attacking Trump's DOJ. I think the smart play here would be focus on the victim protection failures and demand accountability for the redaction process, and then separate the legitimate transparency interests from the unconscionable privacy violations here. And then also, I think there should be a push for an independent special master to oversee proper redactions and republication. That would show that Republicans care about victims while still supporting transparency.
Kate, I'm going to turn back to the immigration crackdown. Over the weekend, 5-year-old Liam Ramos and his father were released from detention on a judge's order. The New York Times, in fact, has been reporting, they had a front-page report in which they said that courts are increasingly ordering the release of those people arrested by ICE. They number in the hundreds. Looking at all these developments, are the courts, Kate, in your view, an effective deterrent against the excesses of this administration when it comes to immigration, particularly of what ICE is doing?
They certainly don't seem to be a deterrent. Todd Blanche, the deputy AG, whom we just saw, gave an interview also earlier today indicating that they will be actually appealing the decision releasing little Liam Conejo. So, and as an immigration lawyer, I have to do these habeas cases. It's something new and very unprecedented that we have to take bond cases into the federal court system. Usually when an immigrant is detained, you can seek bond straight from the immigration judge, but we're having to turn to the federal court system to get relief for people because the immigration court system is so broken right now, and it keeps people detained much longer. Most of the time I find that immigrants in detention who have been there for a week or two decide that they don't want to stay and fight any longer because conditions are so terrible and horrible. In fact, in the Dilley Detention Center where Liam was held, just hours after his release, they revealed that there is a measles outbreak and they are now under lockdown and quarantine. And I have visited this detention center many times. I have actually toured the inside of it. I know what happens when they quarantine. Think little kids, babies, toddlers, as young as Liam or younger, stuck in a cell without the ability to go outside or to go into the lunch hall. Any parent who's been stuck in a room at the dentist office with their kid without toys knows how difficult that is. Now imagine you're stuck in a jail cell for up to 3 weeks at a time. These conditions are deplorable, and I was very shocked to see our deputy AG indicating that they would be appealing this decision. And frankly, as an immigration lawyer, I'm very tired of having to take these cases into federal court when these families, these children, these people shouldn't have been detained in the first place. They're following a legal process.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.